Howdy, howdy, and welcome back to yet another Workshop Wednesday. This week's edition is What's New. This is where we go back once a month. We do this on the first workshop of every month. We go back and we look at the previous month and we take a look at all the updates and features that have been released for all these tools like Tag Manager, Google Analytics, and Data Studio, and get you caught up on all the latest and greatest changes. Before we get too far into this, welcome. If this is your first workshop, my name is Chris Mercer. Everybody calls me Mercer. You should as well. I'm the co-founder of MeasurementMarketing.io, and whether you found us through some of the podcasts and talks that we give, maybe you've seen some of our content that we share with some of the platforms like CXL Institute, Digital Marketer, Social Media Examiner, or Measure Summit. Maybe you're already a member over at MeasurementMarketing.io. However you found us, we're happy that you're here. It's our job to help people just like you stay up to date on all these cool tools like Google Analytics, Tag Manager, and Data Studio. And of course, we do that partially using the Measurement Marketing Academy being our flagship product for those that are looking for training. So the Measurement Marketing Academy basically looks like this. Its whole mission in life is to help you through what we call the framework. So I'm going to cover that very quickly here. The Measurement Marketing Framework, really 3 simple steps: plan, build, and then you act, right? You act on that which you've built. So when we start off as marketers, we start off marketing in the blind. We're trying to get to the point where we have a system that is predictably growing our revenues and results, where our marketing does that. Well, how do we do that? We go through this plan, build, and act process. Now, when you plan, you think about the questions you're trying to answer. You think about the information you're going to need to be able to collect to get the answers. And then most importantly, you think about the actions you're going to take based upon the answers you get. Then you move into the build, where you work with your system. This is start where you jump into tools like Google Analytics and Tag Manager and things like that. And this is where you first make sure that your traffic is set up properly so that you're identifying the who, what, and why. Then you set up your results, what we call ACE goals. So awareness goals, or the goals of where they complete the customer journey, where they engage along the customer journey. Then you do that in a way that structures those as a story that is telling you which traffic is causing which result. Then we move into reading reports. That's where you first act upon the stuff that you've built. Is now you look at the reports, you read those reports for the stories that they should be. Then you forecast based upon what your recent past has been. You forecast your near future, and then you measure against that forecast. That is what will tell you what's working and what's not. That tells you what to optimize, and that's the whole measurement marketing framework in a nutshell. All right, with all of these trainings, and this is obviously no different, focus on just one new thing that you either heard a little differently, one new feature that you think you can explore. Go back and practice that, build that skill, then jump back on this, and you can rewatch this workshop and pick up another one new thing. It's how we train ourselves on how to use these very complicated tools without getting overwhelmed and frustrated. Just focus on one thing. All right, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? What's new? The latest updates released in June 2021. Now we're just going to go ahead and dive right in, and we're going to start with Google Analytics. Now, this is the Google Analytics you're probably still using as of June. Technically, we're recording this in July 7th, the first workshop of July. So in July, you're probably still using this one, which is fine. This is Universal Analytics. However, remember, Universal Analytics not being updated any much more. So we're moving into GA4 because that's where all the hotness is happening. Here's what I want you to look at. We're going to go into a tale of two demo accounts right now. This is the GA4 demo account for Floodit, which Google has set up. And you can see this is probably, with some rare exceptions out there, probably what yours looks like, where you have all these different reports through there. Maybe you don't have games reporting because you're not a gaming company, so it looks more like this. But you have the home, real-time, life cycle, and user, and everything else. This is absolutely what you're used to seeing with GA4. Now, let me show you what's coming your way. I don't have this in my account yet, but this particular version of GA4 does. Notice already, this is radically different. So this is the biggest deal. So we come back in here. It is a completely new interface for GA4. Part of the reason that we are not recommending that everybody use GA4 as their production platform today, because it's just not ready for production level. It's a beta release. It's going to be going through some massive changes. This is a gigantic change in terms of that it's kind of going back on what some of the things are. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, and we won't have time to go into all of these. But certainly, we are recreating yet again for the third time, I think, in a year. We're going to be redoing our Win Google Analytics 4 course coming up because obviously the interface changed. But there's some things I wanted to point out here to keep you up to date. One is obviously this is just going to be different. So when you come back, you will notice it'll just roll out to your account. I was trying to play around with, like, is there a certain, industry that was getting it released or before others, but I've tried that. It doesn't seem to do anything. So it's luck of the draw, but these changes are rolling out. So maybe they're already in your account, maybe not, but they will be. And if you have access to the demo account, Google Analytics demo account, which is not hard, just Google for it if you don't know how to get it, then you can at least play with the reports back here, see what's back here. So first and foremost, reports are back as a name. Initially, when Google Analytics 4 came back, they were trying to get away from this whole idea that it was a reporting platform. They wanted you to use Data Studio for reports. I still think that's a great idea. We use Data Studio for everything. We will still continue to. So the user-facing stuff, when we're looking at our data, we're using Data Studio. However, it confused a lot of people to say, well, what happened to the reports? And they're like, well, we don't really have reports anymore. We have these analysis things. And you're like, okay, but isn't that a report? It's like, well, not really. You should use Data Studio. And it just confused everybody. However, they've come back and said, okay, we're just going to have reports. So there's a report section. In the report section is where you will find your real-time reports. You will also find what used to be called the home screen is now called the snapshot. So there's your real-time reports. So those didn't change. The reports themselves didn't change. All the reports are still in here, just that they're now called reports, which is what they should have been called all this time anyway. So you still see the same basic stuff that's there, right, as we're going through. So that's that. Now, the other section here is Explore. Now, what went away, which you might not notice here, so there's the life cycle and the user reports. That's where they are now. They're sort of a level down. But what you don't see here is the analysis section, which was a really big deal. That was the sort of the pro of GA4. Well, that's gone, sort of, in that it was renamed. So now it's called explorations. So instead of analyses, which is, let's say, that's a complicated term. It's hard for people to think about, like, oh, I'm going to go and analyze stuff. Like, nobody wants to do that. So, but I want to explore my data. Isn't that a little more friendly and fun? So there, explorations. So now everything is called an exploration, not an analysis, as you're coming through. But otherwise, same things. The only thing that changed here was the exploration report is now called a freeform report, because how can you do an exploration of the exploration style report? So I guess they had to rename that. So now it's called freeform, which is kind of the standard exploration report you probably used to. But otherwise, it's not a funnel analysis. It's now a funnel exploration, a path exploration. You see the pattern, segment overlaps, right? So everything's just all about exploring things, cohort exploration. So they still exist. They are now in their own section called Explore, as in to explore the data, which I think is really good. It's a good positive move. Both of these are. So you have your regular reports that are up and out of the way. You've got your exploring things, right? Where you kind of diving into the why things are happening. That's because you're trying to explore and go down the rabbit hole a little bit. That's now under its own section. Then you have advertising. So advertising, again, this is totally new. So this is a new section that was created where they have a sort of a what they call the snapshots, which are now the new, overviews. These used to be called overview reports in in Universal Analytics, but now they're called snapshots. So we have snapshot data that's coming through here with advertising. I would imagine this is going to get better and better and more useful, obviously with more time, because this is still a fairly new report, but there's now attribution. So you've got, now this is fairly similar to what Universal Analytics had. So you've got attribution reports where you can change the models. So coming through here, last click, first place, time decay. Eventually, I'm hearing rumors there's going to be data as well. So it'll be based on data, which would be great. But right now, the standard ones apply: first click, last click, etc. And then there's conversion paths. Now this comes from those of you with Universal Analytics might be familiar with the multi-channel funnel reports. That's kind of what these are. So you've got conversion paths that are now showing that kind of story of how these different sources are coming together to work, right? Or in this case, channels, but we could flip it back and say source. Again, not as useful as Universal Analytics is, because I like being able to see source medium and everything else coming through there, but you get the idea, right? There, you can start to see that they are moving things into GA4 more and more every day. Again, as of July, when we're recording this, July 2021, we are not recommending GA4 be your only platform for Google Analytics, but it must be a platform you are using for Google Analytics because you got to learn it. All right. And so take the next 6 months or so to practice it. Take the rest of 2021 to get this thing set up, start getting it collected with some data back there so you can start learning all this stuff, understanding how you're going to use it as a company, et cetera. So, and then if you've got configurations. Now under configuration, our final report that was released, this is where all the debug stuff went. So now it's like a two-step menu is basically what's happening. The main menu and then your sub-menus. So this is where you'll find debug view for those that are, hopefully you are using this, where you set up your debugs and practicing stuff. This is where it is. This is where you set up your custom definitions. What used to be called user properties back in the day, but they've changed that. Now it's called custom definitions. Back to what it originally was called, and Universal was this. Now they have custom dimensions, custom metrics, right? So it's kind of that same thing that's been set up. But this is where all the configuration stuff is. Not to be outdone, of course, by the admin, where the rest of the configuration is. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. But again, totally different. Now, again, I'm going to go back to the sort of before times of GA4. These are what the reports look like in the before times. So the analysis reports, they renamed them still, so they're still called Explorer here. But this is where your audience report was, your custom definitions, right? Everything else. If I go back into home, I'm going to expand this menu out so you can see it. So all these reports, right, now got put under a main report section. The configuration, like conversions and events and all that stuff, are now to configure, right? So you can start to see some of that here. Debug and all that stuff went under configure. So just realize that they're all here still. For everything, for the most part, you want access to is still going to be here. Just going to be slightly shifted and might be called something different. So big change with GA4. Get on GA4 if you're not already. Again, you should absolutely have an active GA4 setup, because you need to get experience with it. It's not going to be one of those platforms, and a lot of people still think this. They're going to be in for a really cold shower when they switch over to GA4, because they're going to be forced to, and then they realize just how radically different it is and how much how much work it is. It is work. It's a brand new platform, but it's going to be worth it, because you are building your measurement for the future, not just for, the past, the world of the past, which Universal is built to measure. So get on this if you haven't already, and now more than ever, because there's some big changes coming down. You want to get in on those. All right, so that's GA4. That was the biggest update, was GA4 stuff. In Tag Manager world, there's one that we talked about already. I'm just going to bring up a new tag, a little paused account we have here, but just to show you, in the tag configurations, we did talk about this in June's update, when we did the updates that came out in May, technically, where they released this little section of consent settings. And now you've got privacy being built in at the tag manager level. There's going to be more privacy stuff coming out for GA4 as modeling gets released later this year. So you want to start taking a look at this sort of stuff and getting used to it. And again, I know it's confusing. There's a million different ways to do it, it seems like, and everyone's got a different style. And it's still a little, it's still like walking on like hot lava, it feels like, because like no matter where you turn, you're doing it wrong. And I get all that. So, but just do the best to get used to what's back here and realize that, consent's going to be a thing. You're going to need to figure out how to handle privacy in your own organization based upon what your organization is and where it is in the world. But start thinking about that. It's not something that's going to go away. It's just going to be more of it. So you want to get ahead of it and start playing around with some of that. I want to just bring it out here. It's not quite an update that came out in June, because it came out at the end of May, but it was right at the end of May, and I wanted to make sure we emphasized it again. The big deal that came out with Tag Manager in particular was a very small but so overdue change. And that is when you would create a new container. So let's say I come into container settings. I'm just going to create a new one here. We're going to call this my test. Delete this later. I always like to put notes like this, because otherwise I never delete them. So we're going to say it's a little web container. We go to create that. Okay, so now we've created a container that we put our code on the page, right? We do all the stuff. And then this is true, right? Changes are not published. That is true. And that's okay, because you want to put in your initial tags and you want to preview it. Well, back in the day, not that long ago, when you go to preview, your tag assistant wasn't working. It wasn't recognizing Tag Manager, and preview wasn't working. And the trick to it was that you had to publish the container first. You had to have a published container. So what we were recommending to everybody to kind of get over this is you basically go to submit and you submit a blank container, and now you have the changes published. So you can actually preview. That's all. It was just like, hey, I'm gonna publish it. Now at least I have a published container that's back here, and now I can preview it. But now what's happening is, in the background of a new container, they're automatically publishing it. How do we know that? Because I just created a container and published it, and I'm already on version 2, the live version, right? So if I go to my versions, there's version 1. So they actually published it in the background. Even though it says container not published, it is published enough to make preview mode work automatically now. So if you haven't yet, you don't have to publish your containers anymore to get preview to work. They're kind of pre-publishing it. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but that's what happened. It's automatically generated. It's enough that preview mode can work, even though you technically haven't published it. It still shows back there and preview mode works. So that is a very small but massive change and update that came out the Tag Manager, because otherwise you had to publish right away a blank container and then you could use preview mode. And it was a total pain if you forgot to do that. So now you don't have to worry about that anymore. So if anybody's been using that hack, you can take it out of your SOPs going forward. You no longer have to publish a version. It already pre-publishes a version in the background so that preview mode will work from the start and you never have to worry about it again. And just realize when you publish your first version, this is the only thing that's a little confusing, it's always the second version. And if you're ever wondering like, why, how did I just published my first version? Why is it saying it's version 2? You can always go into your versions and you'll see, oh, this first one was the empty one, right? And then the second one was the one that you published in live and latest, whatever else. So just a little mental note there. Again, super overdue change because that's been a pain for a while, but they nailed it. They solved it. So good job, Google. Next up, let's talk about Data Studio. First, I'm going to talk about one that I think is kind of a cool thing. So in File and then Report Settings, you can actually now add GA4. So now this is something where you can add in, and obviously we don't have it set up here, but you could put in like your UA property and then have it report back to whatever the mothership is in Google Analytics, so you can see who's using your reports, right? Now you can do it with measurement IDs as well, which is streams, right? The stream IDs. So that means GA4 can also start to report. You can build reports in Google Analytics 4 about how people are interacting with your Data Studio reports. I think that's a cool feature. It is somewhat useful to some extent. So I would set that up. I mean, might as well. You know, it's something that's not that hard to do, and you can do that. The next thing that is a pretty big deal, and that's with blended data. So what's happened is back in the day, you would set up two different data sources and you would blend these data sources. We do this a lot when we talk about how to set up conversion rates and things like that. And the problem was you could never create a calculated field from blended data because it was almost like reblending data. But now you can. So you can now create calculated fields with blended data. So unfortunately, I don't have anything that's blended on this particular report because you got to be pretty easy here. But the calculated field is when you do calculated fields down here and you set up and you create a new field. So if you wanted to create a field of revenue divided by ad cost and pencil that out as a new calculated field, and you were blending data from two different sources to get those, you can now do it. So just know that you can do it now. That's an important thing for those. Those of you who know what I'm talking about already know it. And if it doesn't mean anything to you, it's totally fine. You haven't needed to do that yet. But blending data is super important, and calculated fields was a necessary thing that rolled out, and that was early in June. So about a little less than 30 days ago that came out. Other changes that came out in Data Studio were really more about maps. So there was a couple things on the Google Maps coming out. Google Ads Manager as a traffic source allowed some things. So if you do anything with Google Ads, that's something that you might want to take a look at. So the Ad Manager is now allowing other things to come through from as a data source. So maybe you can build some different things if you're building anything that uses the Google Ad Manager as a data source. Take a look at that. And then the final change was, let me make sure I got that right. Yes, the final change was community visualizations. This is very, very technical, but just for developers that are out there. In community visualizations, you could, before you were not able to do, let me see if I can find it here, the comparisons. You couldn't turn on and off comparisons. Now you can in community visualizations. So now you can configure the date range comparisons and you can enable those or disable those. So with a community visualization, of which this happens to be one of them. So that's there. So developers have the option to do that now. So just know that that is a thing. And maybe if you've done some community visualizations, you may want to go back and update those for this new format. Last little bit, let me go back to Google Analytics very quickly. I want to point out one other thing that came through. The biggest change, of course, was just the fact that the reports look so different, right? So that's the biggest change. But data import now exists as well. So this is a pretty cool little feature. You can do measurement protocol for this. For those that are a little more technical, if you wanted to automate this, you could do a spreadsheet with a CSV file and you can import stuff into GA4. Again, another reason to start using it because you're going to mess it up. I promise you. The first 3 months of GA4 are going to be a slight nightmare for you. Let's call it what it is. Like, I don't like sugarcoating stuff, and I'm not going to try to trick you into using GA4 by saying it's super easy and awesome. It is awesome. It gets easier, but in the beginning, it's a challenge. It is. So mess it up. Like, you're going to play around with this account for 3 months, and then I expect you to delete it and start over again, knowing with all the lessons that you've learned about GA4. That's the best way to use this platform. And data imports are going to be one of those things you're going to want to play with. So now you can do this. You can import a bunch of offline transactions or rebills. You got to have certain things like client IDs and measurement IDs and all that sort of stuff. But it's a pretty cool feature, and it bodes well for the future of GA4. So that was released as well in June of 2021. So just over the last month or so. All right. With that, I think we can bring it to a close. We covered most of the highlights. What was your one thing? I know for me, it was the GA4 refresh that came out, because anything that affects the user experience, that UI, is definitely something to pay attention to. And it also gives us the direction of where Google is kind of headed, right? They're signaling in a not so subtle way, okay, reports are coming back in. We can use it for reports, which means, I think, reports will be more useful back there. They're going to bring back some reports that maybe others were looking for, like all pages report and landing page report and all these reports that everyone's really used to in Universal that you can kind of get to in GA4, but is a little more challenging than it needs to be. So I think that's a biggest one. But again, if you're using Data Studio a lot, maybe some of that blended data stuff is important. The fact that you can create calculated fields off blended data, that's a big deal. All right, next week, speaking of Data Studio, we are doing a Getting Started edition of Workshop Wednesday. So remember, we change the editions every week. We rotate from what's new to Getting Started to Beyond Basics to strategy sessions and then back. So next week, we do a Getting Started. It's a beginner's topic. And this one is specifically for those of you in the beginning stages of using Google Data Studio. We're going to talk about how to use community visualizations, which are fantastic and 100% necessary. So if you do not know what a community visualization is, if you've never used them, boy, you are in for a treat. Of course, in order to make sure you get that workshop, subscribe to this channel. We are over 2,000 subscribers. Thank you very much for all of those that are continuing to subscribe and help others subscribe. It's been awesome to see that growth, and thank you for continuing to share us however you are. Some people were sending emails out and say, hey, you should check out this channel, so thank you for that. But subscribe. When you subscribe to the channel, it'll notify you, and you can make sure you get access to that workshop as well. The other way that you can do it is by becoming a part of the Measurement Marketing Toolbox. This is a free membership that we give out. We just ask that you use it. That's really it. If you're using the membership, it's something that we allow you to have access to. It has these trainings, so you have access to the weekly trainings, but you also have access to over 40 some odd tools that are back here as well, that you get, including the traffic tracking toolkit that we've got. We're pretty famous for that one. By the way, make a copy of that tool. A lot of people request access to that tool because it's building Google Sheets. You don't need to request access, just make a copy of it. But once you make a copy of it, you can use it. Google Analytics Report Card is a great one to be able to do audits of Google Analytics accounts, things like that. So practice those if you haven't already. To become a Toolbox member completely free, just measure.tip/WW. Again, it's our way of giving back to the community, helping people get started. So I realize that sometimes you're not ready for a paid training program, which is perfectly fine. So use the Toolbox membership. Just be sure to use it. Measure.tips/WW to get access to that. The other option that you have is the Measurement Marketing Academy. We talked about that briefly earlier. Remember, we built the Academy for this purpose. It was to help get you through the Measurement Marketing framework. And then again and again and again going through the framework, because the secret sauce here is that you go through different levels. You start off in a very basic implementation, then you get a little better as you get used to it. You go through the measurement framework again, then you go through it again at a higher level as you get bigger questions that you start to ask and you get better at measurement. So that you go through this over and over and over again. And that's what the Academy is designed to help you to do. A quick tour of the Academy. I'm going to go ahead and bring back our little screen share here. So it all starts off in the dashboard. So you have these little 6 blocks that you can help navigate your way through. This is what you get as part of the Academy. When you, the main things I want to cover here are first the sort of the resources. We'll talk about the resources you have access to, and then the support stuff that you have access to. So the resources, we start off with WIN courses. WIN stands for what I need, because I am not a believer in having a course that's got a million different videos. Who's got time to do that? We don't. You probably don't. But you just want a course that's got what you need. So hence WIN, what I need. So what I need courses, this is just an example of, actually not the example, this is what's back there currently as of this recording. So you can see we just did the Tag Manager server-side courses out, Beyond Basics, Google Data Studio Basics, Google Sheets. These are all organized by date. But but they're also organized by topic. So you can get in there and learn about analytics, including the GA4 basics, which I will be redoing now, I believe, in another month, actually. We're going to do this, so I'm glad those changes came out before I recorded the course. Always a good thing. Tag Manager. Here we got the Beyond basics of Tag Manager, how to do retargeting. You got dashboards and reporting to learn Data Studio basics or Beyond basics, or what numbers are important, how to do traffic attribution. And then strategy, which for me is the secret sauce. I think this is the hardest part of measurement, is understanding the who, what, and why, right? And so that's what the strategy is all about, how to do optimization, how to do forecasting and results, how to use the different tools that are back here, how to think about stuff is super important. So that's one of the places that you can get from a resource perspective on learning this stuff. Now, this is not one of those products that's designed for you to go through and watch every single win course, because maybe you don't need it. It's more of like a just-in-time learning platform. It's whatever you need access to go through. So that's kind of what they're for. We do new courses every 4 to 6 weeks on average. So it's either an update to an existing course or a new one. So that's how that works. The on-demand workshops is the second area for you as an Academy member to have resources. You always have the most recent Workshop Wednesday, so that'll be there. But you also have access to these. These are all unlocked. They have all been edited down to what we call the student editions. So like stuff like what you and I are talking about right now, the Academy tours, all that stuff has been pulled out of them. And they're there so that you can have access to them and search them. So you can come back in and say, oh, I'm going to look for goals or user ID or whatever the thing is that you're trying to measure for. And then, or to find out more about, and it goes through and it scrubs the entire database to say, okay, here are the workshops that we have, the on-demand workshops that talk about anything relating to that term. Here are the different win courses and lessons in those courses that talk about that. So you can get kind of unstuck and on the way, right? Self-directed, that's the on-demand workshops. So just these two, again, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of content. We will produce content faster than you can consume it. I promise you. We just will. So don't worry about getting through everything. It's not about that. It's making sure that whenever you need something, it's there for you at the time that you want it, even if it's like 2 a.m. So that's what the whole concept is between these. The third place for resources is the Toolbox. So the Toolbox itself looks like this. Again, Academy members have access to everything back here, including Get It Done guides, which is exclusively for the Academy members. So you can see things like, these are like little kits where it's like, well, now that you know Tag Manager and Data Studio and how to use Google Analytics, let's make a cool report called the Eyes on the Journey report. Here's how you do it. And it's got templates and videos and steps and a little more of like a, now that you know how to use a hammer and nails, let's build a bench, right? It's that sort of concept around measurement. So very popular section that we are adding to for Academy members. So you have that. So those are the 3 sort of resources that you have access to as an Academy member. Then you've got support. Now you've got the Winner Circle, which is the community. I like this because it's peer-to-peer, it's group, right? So everybody can see what you're posting back there. If you have a question over something that's maybe not a measurement exact question, but maybe it's more around a particular platform like Google Ads or Kajabi or something like that, you can get those answers back there because other members are using those platforms and they all speak measurement marketing. So everyone back there is a measurement marketer. They're learning this stuff, so they get you, right? They understand why you're trying to do that. So that's a really good place for peer-to-peer support. But I know, and you know, that that's not always what you want to do. Sometimes, and this is where the vast majority of members do use this, is the Ask Instructor Support. And the reason is because this is between your side and our side. So our instructors and your side, whoever's asking the question. So the Ask Instructor Support looks like this. When you come in, the whole concept here is we realize that we're not gonna be able to create a video, even videos like this. You can watch a video and then kind of go like, well, it looks a little different now because it got dated or the UI changed or my tech stack is different. Like, how do I do it? Or sometimes you just want a fresh pair of eyes to say, did I do this right? Right? Does it look the same way that it's supposed to? It kind of feels like it's not working out the way I wanted it to, and I'm not sure why. And so we get all sorts of questions. So people can put in like, hey, what should my goals be? We have that happen quite a bit where somebody's like, hey, here's my journey, right? Here's my customer journey. And then they'll type in, here's my funnel, and they walk us through a video. By the way, love screenshots and videos. So send us those. They send us screenshots and videos. We'll watch that. The instructors will then reply back with, okay, here's what we think your ACE goal should be. Try doing this, this, and that. Here's some suggestions to get started. But it could also be something less strategic and more tactical. So if you are trying to set up a goal and it's not quite working, or the reports aren't generating something, or there's some technical reason you can't figure out, send us the issue. It's like you can virtually call us over to your workstation and say, hey, what would you guys do here? Or how do I fix this? And then we'll be like, oh yeah, just check this box. I'll take care of it, right? So that's what we can help you with. It is a whole new level of support, way way beyond I lost my password kind of support. So this is a whole different thing. It's like having a consultant on call. And the answers, again, it's not real time. So I don't want you to say it's like a real time chat support, because it's not. But it is designed to get you answers within 24 hours, 24 business hours. So you get access to answers. You don't have to wait days. That's the idea back here. But Ask Instructor Support is wildly popular with our members, and it should be with you as well, because I think it's kind of worth everything in the academy. Because I think, to be honest, on YouTube, you can go watch a million videos about how to set goals in Google Analytics, but to actually be able to talk with somebody and get some opinions on what the goal should be, or how it's being set up, or how to think about goals and learn all of that strategy, that's what the academy is all about. It's what we excel at. Of course, you do have this final block, which is manage account. That is the I lost my password kind of support, and upgrades, downgrades, stuff like that. That's where this back here. It's kind of normal stuff you would expect. But that's it. That's the academy itself. So I wanted to make sure that you knew all of those parts and pieces. The core components really are the courses, the Ask Instructor Support, the on-demand library, and the Winner Circle community, I think, are the biggest resources that are back there. The courses, you get access to everything, all updates that come out, any new courses we create. We don't limit any of it. You just get access to it all. So by and large, whenever we sell those, if we ever did or do, we sell them for a couple $100 a pop. That's how we get this $3,500 value. So there's actually more than that now back there, because we do new ones all the time, but it's there for you. So you have those. Ask Instructor Support. It's worth at least $500 to have somebody to say, hey, I want you to look at my stuff, and have a consultant on call, right? You won't get that other places for that much. So Ask Instructor Support, I think, is at least a $500 value. The on-demand workshop library, when we definitely don't do this anymore, but when we first started, we sold these videos. Each individual workshop was $20 because we would do them live and then we would sell them. That's how we got started years and years ago. So the on-demand workshop library at $20 a piece, there's it's probably closer to $5,000 now, but at least 4,000 hours of value that you have access to in training support. And then the Winner Circle community. I mean, any good community is worth at least $100 to be a part of. Ours is no different. So there's at least that. So all told, every month that you are an Academy member, you basically have access to a complete training and support system that's basically over $8,500 a month in value. It's a lot of value that we give you each and every month that you're an Academy member back there, and gets more every month. We try to give you even more. So again, it's cheaper than $8,500 a month. We have both monthly and annual options available. Measure.tips/Get Academy will take you to the most recent offers, so you can see what those options are. I would obviously recommend doing the annual option. I think it's the better option. Most members end up upgrading to annual anyway, because you realize, like, measurement isn't a department anymore. Excuse me, I shouldn't say that. It's not a project. People think measurement's a project. Oh, I'm going to set up my goals and then I'm done. I'm going to set up my dashboard and then I'm done. It's never like that. There's always bigger questions to answer. There's always improvements. There's always enhancements. There's always tools that are changing, and there's basic maintenance. Measurement is a department now, and it should be in your organization as well. The Measurement Marketing Academy can help to make sure that you have that. So monthly and annual options available. Just go to measure.tips/Get Academy to learn more. And with that, we'll bring this one officially to a close. This has been What's New, the latest updates released in June 2021. Thanks again for watching this workshop, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.